My name is Mark John, and to back up the pension thing, I work as an interpreter and translator, just to let everybody see further what I think it's Fergal was saying. I've dealt with people in Chile, from Chile, living in Chile, from Argentina, living in Argentina, from Spain, living in Spain, obviously going back to the home countries, have contributed to our country in some way, and I've had to interpret conversations between this body who you mentioned, I can't remember the name, and these people receiving their pensions quite happily wherever they've been. So yeah, just to back that up. But yeah, my question, two real questions. One, yeah, there's a lot of scaremongering around, you know, if Scotland becomes independent, then they'll be rejected from the European Union, whatever. A lot of scaremongering, particularly among newspapers such as Daily Record and these kind of newspapers. Yeah, what's very important for me and for my wife, who's from Peru, and also for Jimena, who's from Colombia, there's a law just been passed in Europe which says that people from Colombia and Peru, funnily enough, are not going to require visas to come in and visit family members. That's obviously a big factor for us. And yeah, so one, joining Europe, what's the landscape of that looking like? And what's our immigration policy moving forward? What's the landscape looking like? The reason I ask is because, well, not just for what I've just mentioned about family coming to visit, but also we've just come to the culmination, funnily enough, we've just applied for her British passport and we're only weeks away from the referendum. It's going to be interesting to see how that unfurls. But also the feeling through this whole process. It's taken us 5 years and it's only supposed to take us 3 years as per UK immigration policy. But the feeling of it is, if any of you have read Harry Potter, those, I can't even remember the name of them now, those big monsters that suck you dry of your soul. Dementors. The UK Border Agency and the Home Office have just felt like dementors. That it's felt like they weren't here to actually control. It's felt like actually they're there with solid barriers trying to stop people come into the country, and it's been a hell of an experience for me and my wife. So yeah, if somebody could kind of touch upon those points.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Two good questions, one on Europe, one on immigration. Mina.
Being an immigrant myself, I decided to tackle this question. Right. Coming into Europe, unlike many people think, it's very difficult. Coming to the north is very, very tricky. Most families need to prove that they have a certain income that the majority of the population in the local countries don't have.
£16,000 or something? Is it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
18,000.
18,600.
There you are, 18,600. Yeah. The border controls are not so hard here because you already have the embassies and the consulates doing that job in locus. I remember when I had to do my interview, I had won a Chevening scholarship to come to Scotland. That's very prestigious, that opened the door. But I happened to fall in love, imagine that terrible thing, with an Englishman. Okay, that was a mistake, okay.
No, it's not.
I made that and fell in love with a Scotsman. Anyway. But yes, guess that, the terrible thing caused me that I had to go back to my country, raise me funds to prove that I was going to come here, not leech the system, and make sure that I could come. Anyway, that required a quantity of letters from many, many friends saying that I was a decent person, I could be trusted, I could come. And the most undignifying interview I've had in my life, where the first question is, what gives you the right to be in our country?
That's shocking.
Well, being naive and a lawyer, I said, the International Convention on Human Rights. They obviously thought I was just being very cheeky. So it was very difficult from then on. But in fin, I have seen many people coming, contributing. I know immigrants are taken as scapegoats. You know, the problems of the country are created because there are too many immigrants, too many people. I frankly can only answer this, again I said, I'm not representing any party's views, any religious views, my own views. I have always felt welcome in Scotland. Scotland is my second home. Sometimes I think it's a bit too Presbyterian, sometimes I think it's a bit too cold. I go back home and I come back and, oh, goodness sake, I'm home. I have not had a problem, and I think I have a feeling, and from the literature I've seen, that the government that is currently in power in Scotland, the devolved government, welcomes immigrants and immigration. Why? Because in order to develop the full potential, Scotland needs hard-working people, needs skilled people, and needs people that are ready to commit regardless of where they come from.
I'll take it and then I'll pass it down. A number of great questions. I want to pick up on the scaremongering one. We wouldn't expect anything less from the might of Whitehall than the scaremongering that we see in mainstream media, but that should not put anyone off. We shouldn't expect anything less. EU membership comes up a lot. What I would say that we've been members for more than 40 years as individuals. We are citizens. There is no mechanism by which to remove us from the European Union, which is very important to note. And the EU, by definition, is expansionist. It believes in expansion, in involving more countries becoming part of it. And it's pragmatic and believes in dealing with things by way of common sense as opposed to putting up obstacles. What a breath of fresh air. And what a breath of fresh air Scotland will be as an independent nation, I think, at the EU top table, contrary to what they're witnessing at the moment from Westminster in terms of their lack of willing and ability, I think, to accurately reflect what Scotland needs at that top table. And I don't think Cameron did himself many favours in terms of Juncker's presidency of the European Commission. Anyway, we'll leave that where it is just now. Good luck with him, and he tries to negotiate a renewed relationship for a 2017 in-out referendum. That is a real risk, however. That's what brings me on to the 2017 in-out referendum. Maybe was a real risk to jobs and prosperity for the people of Scotland. So it's very important that we vote for independence to keep our seat at the top table. Immigration I'll touch on very, very quickly. Absolutely right. I mean, in terms of the current immigration rules, they do not work for Scotland, and they're being changed constantly by the back door. You know, just one rule after the other coming out of the UK Border Agency. I mean, I say that to you as an immigration lawyer. There's one thing after the other. You have to keep up to date with things all the time. And of course, we're facing families who are separate because, you know, it might be easy in London to earn a wage of £18,600 a year, but it ain't that simple in Scotland, and it's certainly not that simple when we don't have any controls of the economic levers or the ability to raise minimum wage or have a living wage that can pay that amount of money, as a direct result of which families are suffering. So that must change. We need to have a fair immigration policy, and it makes no sense to me at all when we in Scotland have 4 of the top 200 universities in the world. Why we don't let those students stay here once they've completed their education. So opportunities are huge for us. EU will welcome us with open arms because we have so much to offer and we already fulfil all of the criteria.
Philippa and then... Alright, okay. I obviously can't work now. From my point of view, my husband's German, sitting over there, driving me the 3,000 miles that we've done in the last 12 weeks. So we better be in the EU, or I'm going to be on my own.
Here, here.
We were in East Berlin 2 months after the wall came down, at the end of, well, kind of came down end of '89. We were there January 1990. And East Berlin looked like something out of a, I don't know, some Armageddon movie. It was black, it was sooty, there were no shops, people drove Trabants, which are made of papier-mâché. And you remember the Stasi, the security police that the East Germans set on their own people, where they lifted people, tortured people, blackmailed people. Now, they voted that march in 1990 to unify with West Germany. And less than 7 months later, 6.5 months later, on the 3rd of October, they were unified. So the EU opened its arms and took in 14 million people, all these companies and businesses that wouldn't have met a single EU regulation and accepted a government and security structures that had terrorised their own people and had an appalling human rights history. So the idea that in 3 times that length of time, we who have met all regulations cannot be accepted into the EU is just absolute nonsense.
Just a quick thing to add. I mean, of course, it's completely ridiculous. It's all part of the scale agenda, and as I've started saying more and more, they have to continue to promote this because there's a complete absence of any compelling positive vision for the continuation of the Union. They cannot come up with anything, so this is the best they can do. I mean, all the points that have been made by Tasmina and Philip, I absolutely agree with it, but I'd just like to say, I suspect now that I'm the Indigenous Scot on the panel, as far as I'm concerned, and let that message go round, we want people to come to our country. It adds to us, it provides knowledge, it provides growth and learning. We want that in Scotland. I have no truck with this, what in fact is overt racism that's promoted by Westminster. We are a forward-looking country. So all are welcome. Bring your skills, bring your knowledge, bring your work to us. It's vitally important people understand that.
Thank you. Sorry, I come up against this sometimes, but very rarely, but on occasion I do come up against it on the doorstep out campaigning. And people will talk about immigrants coming here, taking jobs, etc. And I will always say to them, what, people like me? And they look at you all strange, yeah, but you know, and what's going on in their head, of course, is you're white and you speak English. You know? And there's nothing more annoying to Irish people. We don't see ourselves as being victims or anything like that. We're fully integrated, but we are a distinct group, and to be overlooked like that is rather annoying at times. But it was touched on about taking jobs. And I did 17 years in the Armed Forces. I'm now I'm on my 4th year teaching. I've been working hard all the time and making a net contribution to this country like all immigrants make to this country. And I'm not looking for anyone to say thank you to me. I'm not that type of person. I have a sense of duty and I want to do that duty. But I'm getting fed up, and Michelle touched on it, with a UKIP-driven agenda and a Daily Mail-driven agenda that the Westminster parties are not standing up to. They're not standing up for me. I don't need a thank you, but I would like them to stand up for me. And I would like to publicly say thank you to the Scottish Government who stand up for immigrants. And thank you for the round of applause you gave a few moments ago from what Michelle said, because I know I'm welcome in Scotland.
What could I possibly add to this conversation? Well, 2 things. First, with regards to benefits, I want to thank you again for that question. Aren't we lucky, Andrew, and panelists, to have such an informed audience tonight to ask such very good questions? That is why I believe, madam, that upskilling is so important in terms of our colleges and universities, because the way to get people off of welfare and into workfare is through providing them with the skills that they need to be successful in the 21st century. And only the Scottish Government thinks this way. Only the Scottish Government is directly linking the new courses we're adopting in further education and higher education to the skills that are going to be needed in a 21st century workforce. So I think that's important in terms of it's not going to happen, as others have suggested, overnight, but through higher education, we can make it happen, because young people do want to work and they want to be successful and confident. With regards to immigration, I could write a book about this, because I too have gone through what you have gone through, and I spent 35 years in the United States as a senior professor, and yet went through an interview where they assumed I was a terrorist trying to enter this land. And so I understand and I empathize with what you're saying. But let's forget that for a moment. Can you imagine with me a Scotland where we welcome people, as our panelists have suggested, where we say to them, if you want to work, you have the skills, you have the ambition, come help us build a 21st century country that can compete economically and socially and in every other way among the Council of Nations. Only through the yes vote can we achieve this. We will never achieve it any other way except by voting yes. That's how we attract these people to our country. Finally, in recent days, Humza Yousaf, a dear friend and one of our leading cabinet ministers, has been working with our Scottish government to provide aid and assistance to the people of Palestine. As you probably can ascertain from my surname, I'm Jewish and very proud of being Jewish. But I'm also proud, and this is the first time I've publicly stated this, to be Humza Yousaf's friend. And I applaud him publicly for saying to the people of Palestine, where no one else will take you in, Scotland will welcome you with open arms to our healthcare system, to our social systems, to our economic systems. Sir, you have no idea how difficult that is for a 62-year-old man who was always raised with the understanding that Israel was the major determinant of quality of life in the Middle East and so on. And so I applaud Humza, I applaud our government, I'm proud to support that decision. And only if we vote yes can we have more opportunities like that to show the world that our heart is as big as our head. Thank you.
One beautiful assistant is going to go to another beautiful assistant. Another question.
Hi, I'm Rab from Independence Live. My question for Michelle, but open up to everyone on the panel. Given the inevitable rise in interest rates and the level of debt that the UK is at the moment, is the UK in danger of a bigger crash than what we've just had?
Okay, Michelle?
Yes. Of course, it's more complicated than that. We've had significant issues with really a very, very light touch regulatory environment in the City of London, which we saw starting with the steps that Margaret Thatcher put in place. And we've seen where that's ended up. And if you look at the statements, particularly from the likes of Vince Cable about we need to get this sorted out, and you look at the actions that have resulted from that, they've been very, very limited. There is talking going on in terms of protecting banks and so on, because quite frankly the UK, if there is another crash, cannot afford to take a similar action that it did. We're out of money, guys, even printing it. But I do genuinely believe there's a risk, because I have seen no steps from the City of London, and in fact it's much more scary than that. They are propelling a further property boom, and we see huge differential in our kind of property prices here that haven't pretty much recovered to pre-crash levels, particularly in areas like the Central Belt. We've got some movement in Edinburgh, so there's a very real risk. Interest rates are different. I mean, in actual fact, interest rates probably need to rise anyway because they're at an unsustainably low level. Cost of funds is usually about 5%. They're not really at the Bank of England base rate 0.5%. That's almost like not a real kind of interest rate. Nobody's lending out money at that kind of level. So yes, I do agree with that. And it all comes back to this. I mean, it's as though it's a topsy-turvy world. The emphasis is all on cutting public services. It's kind of, I know it sounds a bit obvious to say that, but when did the last time the UK government have a conversation about wealth creation and about job creation? This is at the heart of what we need to do. It's the flip side of the other coin, you know, and that's something that the Scottish Government consistently talks about. We need, and it's not this idea about getting people back into work. So as Philippa says, creating quality jobs where people can afford to live, that contribute to the economy, that contribute to the tax take and so on. And I think this road of eternal cutting, therein lies madness. There's no evidence of an austerity agenda working. You know, it's just that the world's completely mad. So yes, I would agree there is a risk of that, because I don't see any systematic changes within the City of London. They're quite frankly out of control, to my mind.
Thank you.
It just came to mind a principle in law that says that what is accessory follows the luck or the fate of the principle. If we're attached to Westminster, whatever it's gearing towards, that is following a neoliberal model. for all extents and purposes. Hence, you're cutting social and public services. Hence, the privatization of all those services. They're trying to make as much money as possible and cut out the welfare system. They do that from the centre, they'll do that to us. This is what's happening if we continue to be attached. And that's why we need an independent system that can think, right, this model of generating riches is good, but it's lacking in something, and it's the social justice element that is so precious to the Scots. We want to help those that are elderly and infirm, and we want to get those that can work and contribute to get up off the bottom. Sorry, I didn't swear, bottoms, and start working and contributing.
Still rude.